She noticed it on a Tuesday. He left the building at exactly 7:14 in the evening, the same time he always did, but something about the way he moved was different. His head was low, his steps were quick, almost rushed. He clutched his bag close to his side like he was hiding something inside it, and when he reached the parking lot, he did not go to his car. He walked right past it. She watched from the window of her corner office on the 14th floor. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he was meeting someone. She turned back to her desk and tried to focus on the reports waiting in front of her. But the next evening, she noticed again. Same time, same low head, same quick steps, same path away from his car. By the third evening, she could not ignore it anymore. There was something in his face, a look she could not quite name. Not guilt exactly, more like burden, like a man carrying something invisible on his shoulders, something heavy, something secret. She did not know yet what it was, but she knew, standing at that window with the city glowing beneath her, that whatever Marcus Green was walking toward every night after work, it mattered, and something told her she needed to find out why. Her name was Diana Caldwell, and by every measure that the world uses to define success, she had achieved it. At 41 years old, Diana was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Innovations, a mid-sized technology company that had grown from a two-person startup in a cramped apartment to a thriving firm of over 300 employees. She had been featured in 3 business magazines in the past year alone. She drove a silver sedan that cost more than most people earned in 2 years. She lived on the 22nd floor of a building where the views of the city stretched endlessly in every direction. But Diana was not the kind of woman who forgot where she came from. She had been raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She remembered what it felt like to count coins before grocery shopping. She remembered wearing the same pair of shoes through an entire winter because there was no money for new ones. That memory had never left her. It had shaped the kind of leader she tried to be, someone who actually saw the people around her, not just the numbers on a spreadsheet. Marcus Green had been working at Caldwell Innovations for 4 years. He was 29 years old. He came in every morning at 6, before most of the office arrived, and he moved through the building with a quiet efficiency that had always impressed Diana. He never missed a day. He never complained. He greeted everyone he passed with a nod and a small, sincere smile. The kind of smile that did not ask for anything in return. Diana had spoken to him many times over the years. Brief conversations mostly, a good morning in the hallway, a thank you when she found her office freshly cleaned, a few words exchanged during the annual staff holiday party where Marcus always came, always brought a small homemade dish to share, and always left a little early. She knew he had a daughter. He had mentioned her once or twice in passing. Lily, he called her. She was 7 years old. When he raised her alone, that much Diana had gathered without ever asking directly. There was no wedding ring. There were no mentions of a partner. Just Marcus and Lily, and the quiet way he carried that life by himself. He was a good man. Diana had always felt that without needing a reason to feel it, which was exactly why she could not stop thinking about what she had seen in his face on those 3 evenings. That look, that weight. Something was wrong, and it had been wrong for a while. The 4th evening, Diana stayed late on purpose. She told her assistant she had calls to finish. She dimmed the lights in her office and positioned herself near the window with a cup of tea, her eyes on the parking lot below. She felt strange doing it. She was not the kind of person who watched her employees. But this was different. This was concern, not suspicion. At least that was what she told herself. At 7:14, Marcus appeared at the front entrance of the building. He stood for a moment in the cold air, pulling his coat around himself. Then he shifted his bag on his shoulder and started walking. Not toward the bus stop, not toward the parking lot. He turned left down the side street and walked quickly toward the older part of the neighborhood, the part with the small convenience stores and the laundromat and the narrow buildings with faded paint. Diana watched until he disappeared around the corner. The next morning, she arrived early and quietly asked Renee, the front desk coordinator who had worked at the company almost as long as Marcus, if she knew anything. Renee hesitated. She looked down at her keyboard and then back up at Diana. "I don't want to say something I'm not supposed to," she said carefully. "I'm not asking to get anyone in trouble," Diana said. "I'm asking because I'm concerned." Renee was quiet for another moment. Then she said softly, "He's had a hard few months. That's all I know. He doesn't talk about it much, but he looks tired, Ms. Caldwell, more tired than usual." Diana thanked her and went up to her office. She sat at her desk and opened Marcus's employee file. She was not looking for anything specific, just trying to understand the picture. What she found was ordinary and, in its ordinariness, quietly heartbreaking. 4 years of perfect attendance, no disciplinary notes, a modest salary that had received one small raise 18 months ago. A note from his direct supervisor the previous year that said simply, "Marcus continues to be one of the most dependable members of our team." She closed the file. For the rest of the day, that word stayed with her. Dependable. It was the kind of word that people used about someone who showed up even when they were struggling, even when they had every reason not to. She followed him on a Thursday. Diana was not proud of it. She wore a coat she did not usually wear to work, something plain and dark, and she left the building through the side entrance a few minutes before 7:14. She stood near the edge of the parking lot, half hidden by the shadow of a large van, and she waited. When Marcus came through the front entrance, she gave him a full block's head start before she followed. The evening air was cold and carried the faint smell of rain that had not yet arrived. The streets in this part of the city were quiet at this hour, restaurants beginning to fill up. On storefronts pulling down their gates, a few people walking dogs, heads down against the wind. Marcus walked fast. He moved like someone who knew exactly where he was going and exactly how long it would take him to get there. He did not stop. He did not look around. Diana kept her distance. She felt the strangeness of what she was doing, a CEO in a dark coat, trailing a janitor through the cold streets of the city, and she almost stopped twice, almost turned around, almost told herself it was not her business, but she kept walking. Marcus turned down a narrow street and then through a gate into a small courtyard. Diana slowed. She stopped at the corner and looked through the iron bars of the gate. On the far side of the courtyard was a low building with a sign above the door. Even from a distance, in the dim evening light, she could read it. St. Catherine's Children's Medical Center. She stood very still. She watched Marcus push open the door and step inside, the light from the lobby briefly illuminating his face before the door swung shut behind him. And in that moment, everything she had been wondering about for the past week arranged itself into a shape she had not expected. The exhaustion in his face, the way he walked with a bag full of something, the long evenings, the nights he spent somewhere other than home. She stood at that gate for a long time, the cold wrapped around her shoulders. The city moved on around her, indifferent and unhurried. Then she turned and walked back the way she had come. She could not sleep. She lay in her apartment that night with the lights of the city coming through the curtains, and she thought about Marcus. She thought about Lily. She thought about a 7-year-old girl in a hospital bed and a young man who had been carrying that reality every single day and had not said a word about it to anyone, or almost anyone. The next morning, Diana called Renee again. This time she was more direct. "His daughter," Diana said quietly. "Is she sick?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds. "How did you find out?" Renee finally asked. "I followed him last night." I know that sounds, I know, but I needed to understand." Another pause. "It's her heart," Renee said, her voice dropping. "She was diagnosed about 6 months ago. There's a surgery. It's the only thing that can really fix it, but it's expensive. And the insurance," she trailed off. "The insurance doesn't cover all of it. There's a gap, a big one. Marcus has been working a second shift at a cleaning company on weekends, and he goes to the hospital every night to sit with her before she sleeps. He does it so she doesn't feel alone." Diana closed her eyes. She thought about every evening she had watched him walk past his car. She thought about the bag he always carried, probably full of things for Lily. Books maybe, a stuffed animal. Whatever a father brings to a sick child to make a hospital room feel a little more like home. She thought about the smile he gave everyone he passed in the building. The dependable smile of a man who kept showing up, day after day, while his whole world was quietly breaking apart. She sat at her desk and did not move for a very long time. She had built a company. She had made decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives. She had signed contracts and closed deals and stood in front of rooms full of investors and never once let them see her doubt. But sitting at her desk that morning, thinking about Marcus and Lily, something in her cracked open. Not dramatically, not with tears or loud realizations, just quietly, the way light comes through a window that has been kept shut for too long. She thought about all the times she had walked past Marcus in the hallway without really looking at him. Not unkindly. She had always been polite, always said hello, but she had never asked how he was doing. Not really. Not the kind of asking that leaves space for an honest answer. She had seen him as part of the building, as someone who was simply there, dependable, present, and she had never stopped to wonder what that presence was costing him. How many times had he arrived at 6 in the morning, having spent the previous evening at a hospital bedside, and still done his job without complaint? How many weekends had he given up, working a second job to fill a financial gap that should not have been his to fill alone. How many nights had he sat with his daughter, holding her hand in the quiet of a children's ward, and then come back the next morning and smiled at everyone he passed? The weight of it pressed down on Diana in a way she had not expected. She thought about her own life, the apartment, the car, the company, the awards that sat in frames on her office wall, all of it earned. Yes, she had worked hard for every piece of it, but she had not worked in a vacuum. She had had mentors. She had had investors who believed in her. She had had a team of people like Marcus, whose quiet, consistent labor had helped build something larger than themselves. And what had she done with that understanding? She sat with the question. She did not rush past it. The truth was uncomfortable, and Diana had learned over the years that uncomfortable truths were the ones worth sitting with. She did not do it publicly. That was important to her. Whatever she did had to be done quietly, without announcement, without recognition, without making Marcus feel like a charity case or a story to be told. She spent 2 evenings making calls. The first call was to the hospital's patient services coordinator. She asked, without giving her name, about the financial gap in the treatment plan for a pediatric cardiac patient. She asked what the remaining amount was. She asked how it could be paid anonymously. The number was significant. Not crippling to Diana, but significant. The kind of number that would have been impossible for Marcus to reach alone, even with the second job, even with every sacrifice he was making. She arranged the payment through a small foundation she had quietly established years ago for exactly these kinds of situations, moments that did not need fanfare, just action. Then she made a second call, to HR. She asked about salary review timelines and what the process would be for a merit-based increase for long-serving staff. She reviewed Marcus's file one more time and authorized a raise, one that reflected 4 years of dependable service and that she quietly acknowledged should have happened sooner. She did not tell anyone what she had done, not Renee, not her assistant, no one. She went home that night and sat by her window with a glass of water and watched the city below and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not pride exactly, more like peace, the kind that comes not from achieving something, but from doing something that needed to be done. 3 weeks passed. On a Monday morning, Diana was in the small kitchen on the 3rd floor, pouring her first cup of coffee, when Marcus came in. He stopped when he saw her. He looked different. Something in his face had changed. The lines of tension that had lived there for months had softened, just slightly. His eyes were clearer. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, Marcus." She smiled. He poured himself a coffee and stood for a moment beside her, and then he said quietly and carefully, "Ms. Caldwell, can I ask you something?" She turned to look at him. "My daughter's treatment," he said. "The remaining balance, it was paid. Anonymously." He paused. "The hospital said it came through a private foundation, but I did some asking around." He looked down at his cup. "I think I know who it was." Diana held his gaze. She did not deny it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he looked up again, his eyes were bright. Not with tears exactly, with something more controlled than that, something that held itself together through sheer will. "Why?" he asked. It was the only word he could find. Because it was the right thing," Diana said simply. He nodded slowly. He opened his mouth and then closed it again. Then, very quietly, he said, "She's going to be okay. The surgeon says the procedure went well. She's already trying to boss the nurses around." A small, real smile crossed his face. "She's just like her mother was." Diana smiled too. "She sounds like a fighter." "She is," Marcus said. "She really is." He stood there for another moment. He looked like a man who had much more to say but did not know how to say it, and Diana understood that. Some feelings are too large for words. Some gratitude lives in a place deeper than language. "Thank you," he said finally, just those 2 words. "Take care of her," Diana said. Lily was discharged from St. Catherine's on a Friday afternoon, 6 weeks after the surgery. Diana did not know this at first. She found out the following Monday when Marcus came into the building carrying a small drawing, a child's drawing, done in crayon on a piece of paper torn from a notebook. He had folded it carefully and left it on Diana's desk while she was in a meeting. On the outside, in a child's uneven handwriting, it said, "For the kind lady." Inside was a drawing of 2 figures, one tall, one small. They were holding hands and smiling. The sun above them was a bright yellow circle. The sky was blue. There were flowers along the bottom of the page in every color. Diana sat at her desk and looked at that drawing for a long time. She thought about the little girl who had drawn it, a girl who did not know her name, who probably knew only that something good had happened, that the worry on her father's face had slowly eased,
that they were going home. She thought about Marcus.
About all the things he had carried and had not asked anyone to help him carry. She thought about what it means to truly see another person, not just to acknowledge their presence, but to understand that behind every face that moves through your day, there is a life, full and complicated and sometimes quietly desperate, that you may know nothing about. She had a good frame on the wall behind her desk. Awards, a magazine cover, milestones. She removed one of them. She put Lily's drawing in its place. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not appear in headlines or highlight reels. It does not ask to be recognized or admired. It simply shows up every morning at 6 o'clock with a quiet smile and does what needs to be done, even when no one is watching, even when the weight of it is almost unbearable. Marcus Green had that kind of strength. He had been carrying his daughter's illness, his financial fear, his exhaustion, and his grief, and he had not let any of it make him smaller. He had not let it steal the smile he gave to every person he passed. He had not let it turn him bitter or closed, and Diana Caldwell had almost missed it entirely. We move through our days surrounded by people whose struggles are invisible to us. We see the surface, the uniform, the title, the role, and we forget that every person is the main character of their own story. A story that is sometimes joyful and sometimes devastating and almost always more complex than we imagine. The truest form of power, Diana had come to understand, is not the ability to make decisions or sign checks. It is the ability to notice. To really look at the people around you and to ask, not just professionally, not just politely, but genuinely, how are you? Because sometimes, behind the quiet and the dependability and the smile that never asks for anything in return, there is a father sitting by a hospital bed every night, reading to his daughter, telling her that everything is going to be okay, believing it hard enough for both of them. And sometimes, if you are paying attention, you can be the person who makes that true. The drawing still hangs on Diana's wall. She sees it every morning when she sits down at her desk, and every morning it reminds her to look. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.